5 years after our marriage, my husband, who had always loved my wife, cheated on her. The third party sent a message to provoke. Emily, my sister. Do you think Jacob and I are a good match? I looked at the intimate photos on the bed with red eyes. I couldn't help but burst into tears. Jacob, let's get a divorce. I was in a low mood. I was about to give up, but suddenly my eyes lit up. My phone dropped to the ground with a pop. It was the moment I was about to send the message. A new message suddenly popped up. Emily, let's get together. It said in the note, 19-year-old Jacob. I hadn't had time to react. The sentence was withdrawn. Then, he sent another message. The tone became cold. Who are you? Why are you using the same avatar and nickname as Emily? I sent the wrong message. I was impulsive. Without thinking about the fear, I quickly replied. Emily said, I'm Emily, Jacob. We're done here. The message from across the room came back immediately. You're Emily. No way. Who the hell are you? You want me to leave Emily? What the hell do you want? He asked 3 questions in a row. Each one sounded urgent. I finally calmed down, but I felt a sense of emptiness in my heart. Hurry up and pick up the phone and reply. I'm 30-year-old Emily. The future you will betray me. So don't expect me to either. 19-year-old. There was a sudden silence on the other end of the line. 10 seconds later, the teenager sent a voice message. His tone was firm. He couldn't wait to prove himself. No way, I love Emily. I'll never betray her. His heartfelt confession was cut short by a shrill video call ringtone. The caller was 30-year-old Jacob, but what appeared on the screen was Olivia's 5-month-old pregnant belly. Olivia's face was flushed with an indescribable rosy hue. She looked exceptionally charming, as if she had just enjoyed a delicious meal. Her contentment was palpable. However, all this beauty was instantly shattered when I saw the malicious smirk on her face. She said to me in a sarcastic tone, Emily, Jacob says he feels sticky and has just taken a shower. He insists on staying with me and the baby tonight. I don't think he has the nerve to tell you, so I'm here to let you know. Don't be mad at him. The baby has been so difficult lately. He's had a hard time dealing with it. Do you think he's got another woman pregnant? She's been pregnant for so long. I stared at her with wide eyes. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My mind was in a whirl. My eyes welled up with tears. The phone screen still displayed the teenager's vow. Olivia gently stroked her growing belly. As she looked at my panicked face, her mocking smile became even more obvious. I was at a loss for words. I stuttered, you, how? Before I could finish my sentence, Olivia gently placed a finger over her mouth. She motioned for me to be quiet. Her phone was quietly placed in the dark. It was recording. It captured everything that happened in the room. Then she spoke gently to me. Olivia, come sit here. I'll put some pregnancy oil on you, okay? A gentle, low voice came from the man, but my ears felt a sharp pain. Jacob sat on the edge of the bed, holding Olivia in his arms. His hand gently massaged her bulging belly. Finally, he leaned down and kissed her belly. Olivia cooed. She gently pushed his head down. Jacob, I still want to. Jacob blushed. You've just stabilized. The doctor said not too often. Don't worry. I'm not as weak as Emily. I need to take supplements all day long, and I still can't have a baby. Besides, you're actually looking forward to it, aren't you? Hearing her teasing like this, Jacob's face only sank slightly. In the end, he sighed helplessly. He lowered his head with affection and indulgence. The sound of water and breathing came softly. Olivia panted slightly. From time to time, she glanced at her phone. Her face wore a triumphant smile. I covered my mouth with both hands. I held back the urge to cry out. I hung up on the video in a daze. Several urgent messages suddenly popped up on the screen. No matter who you are, don't even think about trying to drive a wedge between Emily and me. I have deep feelings for Emily. They will never change in this life, and I will never betray her. I smiled bitterly. It seemed as if I could see Jacob's stubborn, angry face. If I remembered correctly, today, at the age of 19, was the day he confessed his love to me. Those vows from my youth still seemed to echo in my ears. However, the unbearable video just now was still clearly floating in front of my eyes. The person on the other end hesitated for a moment. His voice sounded a little panicked. I accidentally sent the wrong message to you. Emily is already angry. She's ignoring me. I lowered my head. I felt a little lost. It was a particularly cold day. I fainted from my menstrual pain. Passers-by found me and took me to the hospital. When Jacob found out, he didn't even compete in the competition. He hurried to the hospital to take care of me. I looked at a small scar on my hand. It was left when the intern nurse injected the wrong medicine. He gently held my hand and blew on it carefully. I couldn't help but cry, and kept blaming himself for not taking good care of me. My thoughts were suddenly interrupted. She just has menstrual pain. I don't have the energy to reply to you. The other person quickly indicated that they had read it. But I waited a long time. He didn't even reply to me at that moment. The door suddenly opened. I was startled. I looked up sharply. I happened to be eye to eye with Jacob, who was 30 years old. He walked over, gently put his arms around my waist, and handed me the ice cream cake in his hand, and said with a smile, "Emily, I made this ice cream cake especially for you, to celebrate our 7th wedding anniversary." Although his voice was gentle, it sounded like it was piercing my eardrums. I gave a bitter smile, and suppressed the vague pain in my abdomen. In the past, he had set a rule. Ice must never be touched during menstruation. No matter how I begged him, it was useless. Now, he had broken this rule himself. I looked at the ice cream cake, which didn't look very good. I felt even more disappointed. I was even a little angry. The cake in his hands was almost exactly the same as the photo of the DIY couple's cake Olivia had sent. Was it made specially for me? Or was it a failed attempt at playing with the person you like? I skillfully avoided his kiss. He smelled strongly of perfume, together with the way he behaved in public and in private. It was really unbearable. Jacob didn't notice my avoidance. He cut a piece of cake and handed it to me. "Eat quickly. It will melt soon." I put the cold dessert into my mouth, but it felt particularly bitter. I stuffed it into my mouth bite after bite. My stomach started to ache. In the end, I turned pale. Cold sweat broke out. Jacob didn't notice his surroundings at all. He was just looking at his phone. His face was wearing a helpless but indulgent smile. He raised his hand to check the time. It was as if he had planned it all along. He said, "Something urgent has come up at the office. I have to go now." Only then did he look up at me. When he saw how I looked, his eyebrows furrowed. He looked impatient. There was also a hint of disgust. Jacob couldn't understand why Olivia had insisted that he come back to deliver this insignificant cake. He didn't even want to see the listless-looking woman. Before I could say anything, he looked away. Without hesitation, he turned and left. I gave a bitter smile, pretending not to notice the name Olivia flashing on his phone screen. He had just spoken to me coldly, and then he turned his attention to someone else. "Jacob, how could you do this to me?" The silence in the empty house was unnerving. I curled up in pain, biting my knee. Tears kept falling. A new message from Olivia on my phone. "Emily, I asked Jacob to send you the cake. Is it delicious?" My hands tremble as I switch screens. I type quickly, "Jacob, please stop appearing in my life. You can't love me forever. You're just lying to me. I'm begging you. Leave me alone." The boy never responds. My head feels heavier and heavier. My eyes are starting to give out. I opened my eyes dazedly. Why do I see another me lying in bed? The teenager was wearing a blue and white striped competition shirt. He was holding my hand tightly. Tears were about to fall. "Emily, you've finally woken up. I just gave you some painkillers. Do you feel better now? It's all my fault. If I had known that you had such severe menstrual pain, I definitely would not have left your side. It's all my fault for not taking care of you." 19-year-old Jacob lowered his head. Tears fell one after the other onto the back of her hand. It was as if they had touched the softest place in her heart. My eyes tightened. I looked at the other me as she tried to force a smile. I took the teenager's hand. I said seriously, "Jacob, let's be together." "No, I don't want to be with him." I shouted. I woke up from the dream. My face was full of tears. My breathing became faster and faster. My body trembled uncontrollably. A feeling of despair gradually engulfed me. Suddenly, the screen of my phone lit up. The light shone on my tear-stained face. I reached out to take the phone, but then my body suddenly tensed. I quickly switched on the light in my room. I opened my eyes wide. I noticed that the small scar on my hand had disappeared. Tears welled up in my eyes. Did what just happened in my dream really happen? I didn't faint from the pain and go to the hospital, because Jacob came early to take care of me. I opened my phone with trembling hands. Sure enough, I saw several thank you messages from 19-year-old Jacob. He said, "Thank you for telling me about Emily's menstrual pain. No matter what happens, I love Emily. I will never leave her. You should give up on that idea. Love me." I typed these words with all my strength. "What makes you think you can love me?" With photos of you in bed with another woman. I was so emotional that I sent him all those intimate photos, one after the other. There was suddenly silence on the other end. 10 seconds later, the teenager said firmly, "No way, you'd fake these indecent photos." I truly love Emily. I would never do such a thing. Who are you? What do you want? I used the voice function and sent the messages quickly one after the other during the first semester of freshman year. You first saw me at the planetarium and gave me the model you made, saying I was the most special girl you'd ever met. You asked me out for a night on the town and promised to go to the museum with me every month. You held my hand in the cinema. The box of stars you gave me was full of words of confession. The other person suddenly interrupted me. These are all the little secrets between Emily and me. How did you know? And also, why does your voice sound like that? He had just asked halfway through, suddenly frozen, as if he had realized something. His voice trembled as he said, You really are from the future. I saw how at a loss he was, so I calmly responded to him, a calm I had never felt before. Jacob, you have caused me pain 100 times worse than my period. Please leave me alone. Disappear from my life, since he can change the future. Then we shouldn't be together. The young man asked with confusion and pleading. Why? Emily, don't you believe me? I love you. I will never betray you. I close my eyes. I feel a sense of powerlessness. Jacob, 30, sends a message. Tell me to tidy up the master bedroom. Who will be living there needs no explanation. Jacob, you need to see it with your own eyes before you believe it. You will definitely betray me. Why haven't you tidied the room yet? Jacob, 30, scolds loudly. His eyes are full of annoyance. I look at Olivia, snuggled in Jacob's arms. A feeling of bitterness wells up in my heart. My stomach ached. The glass in my hand slipped. It shattered on the floor. Jacob, you're not even willing to pretend anymore. Olivia's eyes sparkled with a triumphant light. The corners of her mouth rose slightly. She gently touched her 5-month-old belly, speaking slowly. Emily, don't blame Jacob. He's just worried that I'm pregnant and won't be able to take care of myself. That's why he insisted that I move in with him. I tried hard to control my emotions and handed Jacob the document in her hand. The words divorce agreement in the paper stood out. At this moment, both Jacob from different times froze. Before they entered the door, I had already made a video call to 19-year-old Jacob. Since he didn't believe it, I let him see for himself, see how he let me down. Soon, 30-year-old Jacob came back to his senses. His face suddenly turned ugly. His eyes were full of anger. Emily, is this really necessary? I just asked you to tidy up your room. Why are you making it sound like it's the end of the world? He said. He grabbed the divorce papers, torn them into pieces, and threw them at me. Even if we're getting a divorce, I'll be the one to initiate it. What makes you say that? Olivia quickly pulled him back, pretending to kindly persuade him. Jacob, don't be angry with Emily. She may have been trying to get pregnant for many years without success. She suddenly saw that I was pregnant. She couldn't accept it at first. That's why she reacted like this. Her words reminded Jacob of the years I was unable to get pregnant. His face turned even more unpleasant. He took Olivia in his arms and said firmly, Olivia is pregnant with my child. From today on, she will live here to nurture the baby. You take care of her. I clenched my fists. My heart felt like it had been stabbed countless times. I didn't even have the strength to cry. I didn't say another word. I knelt down to pick up the broken glass on the floor. At that moment, an uncontrollable roar suddenly came from my phone. You can't do this to her. The boy's voice was hoarse. It was full of pain and a hint of tears. Jacob frowned. He looked puzzled. I quickly tried to stand up and get my phone, but he was faster. He snatched it away. I was pushed to the ground. Glass fragments pierced my back. The pain spread throughout my body. Jacob instinctively wanted to reach out to help me, but he was drawn to Olivia's scream. Jacob, this person looks so much like you. His face immediately changed. Jacob froze, staring at the teenager on the screen who looked almost exactly like him. He couldn't believe his eyes. The only difference was that the teenager's face was full of stubbornness and anger. His eyes were full of hatred, as if Jacob had done something unforgivable. He panicked for a moment. His finger accidentally touched the hang-up button. The message on the screen suddenly zoomed in. It was clearly displayed in front of his eyes. 19-year-old Jacob looked at the content in front of him. He couldn't believe his eyes. She read word by word. Her eyes gradually changed from initial panic to anger and disgust. Emily, what's wrong? Do you love me so much that you want to find someone else to replace me? He didn't say a word. I was so angry that I almost threw the phone out of my hands. I opened my eyes wide. I endured the pain of the glass shards piercing my body. I crawled to his feet. I grabbed his arm. I shook my head desperately, pleading, Don't Don't drop the phone. If the phone breaks, I'll never have a chance to change the future." The veins on Jacob's forehead stood out. He shook my hand away in disgust and slammed the phone onto the ground. He grabbed my chin firmly. His tone was full of disgust. "Why don't you tell me? How does it feel to be a substitute? Can you take care of a character like you?" Well, I listened to his unpleasant words. My eyes were red. I stared at the ground. The phone had been deformed by the fall. The screen was broken into pieces. It was completely unrecognizable. I crawled over. My trembling hand picked up the phone. The young man's heartbroken and angry cries still echoed in my ears. It felt like a stab in my heart. It hurt. It hurt so much that I could hardly breathe. My eyes were vacant and lifeless. Suddenly, I gave a bitter smile. Jacob saw my appearance. He was stunned. "Emily, you—" I stopped listening to him. I stood up with all my might. Desperately, I grabbed the fruit knife on the dining table. I was going to stab myself in the chest. "Emily." Jacob's eyes turned red. He came running over to stop me, panicked. I gave a bitter smile. "Jacob, it's too late. I can't change the fact that you don't love me. If you won't go, then let me go." I closed my eyes in despair. I pushed the knife forward, but the expected pain didn't come. Then a hand, dripping with warm liquid, trembled and touched my face. "Emily, I'm sorry. Don't do anything stupid." I opened my eyes wide. Tears flowed unstoppably. The teenager suddenly appeared in front of me. A sharp knife had pierced his chest. His white shirt was stained red with blood. His face had turned pale. He said, "Emily, I wanted to keep my promise to love you forever. But why does God have to tease me like this?" My heart suddenly tightened. Panic came flooding over me. It overwhelmed me. I frantically pressed my hands on his bleeding chest. My voice was hoarse. "You must hang on. I'll take you to the hospital right away. I'll take you now." The teenager shook his head. He smiled and gently wiped away the tears on my face. He said, "It doesn't hurt. Don't cry." I tried hard to help him up, but for some reason the teenager collapsed in my arms. His body slowly became transparent. A sense of despair I had never felt before overwhelmed me. I desperately grasped at him in panic. My hands were stained red. He hung his arms down weakly, but his voice remained firm. "I love you. Don't do this. Don't." I couldn't help but burst into tears. His figure gradually became transparent. Eventually, it completely disappeared into the sky. He was completely gone. Only the unbreakable vow of love remained. Jacob, 30, stared with wide eyes. Unable to believe his eyes, he stared at the back of the man who looked almost exactly like him. The figure flashed before his eyes, and then it disappeared quickly. Suddenly, he felt a sharp pain. He clutched his hands around his head. He slumped to the ground. His mind kept flashing back to the scenes of his youth when he was in love with his lover. It was like a movie playing out in front of his eyes. Those memories seemed to have happened just yesterday. They were clear and beautiful. Olivia seemed to have been shocked just now. I don't know what happened. She ran to Jacob in a panic. "Jacob, what's wrong with you?" She stared at me angrily and asked, "What have you done to him? You damned person." I came back to my senses. The tears on my face had dried up. After experiencing extreme despair, I felt like I had been reborn. I ignored her, stood up, and calmly looked at Jacob lying on the ground. I said to him, "Jacob, we are really over. This family, this relationship, it's no longer worth keeping alive." I gathered my things. Jacob was still sitting on the floor like a lost soul. No matter how Olivia tried to persuade him, he didn't respond. But at this point, I didn't care anymore. I was just about to leave the house when Jacob rushed over to me and asked, "Emily, where are you going?" I looked at him calmly and said, "If you don't want to sign the divorce papers, then I will have to apply for a divorce through legal channels. You will be notified." After saying that, I turned around and was about to leave. Perhaps it was the word divorce that touched him. He suddenly looked up. He tightly grasped my hand and asked, "Divorce? Don't divorce, Emily. We won't divorce." Olivia quickly stepped forward to stop him, grabbing his arm. She said, "Jacob, you don't say things like that." Jacob's eyes suddenly turned red. He tightly grasped my hand, gripping it harder and harder, as if he was afraid I would leave. He said in a pleading tone, "Emily, I love you. Don't go." I frowned. I couldn't understand why he suddenly lost control. I shook his hand off and walked out without looking back. Jacob tried to catch up. Olivia saw that she couldn't stop him, so she deliberately fell to the ground, covering her stomach and shouting, "Jacob, my stomach hurts." Jacob was shocked. He quickly turned around to look at her, but he didn't catch up. I moved in with my best friend Sophia. since Jacob and I had been trying to get pregnant for years without success. Sophia was very unhappy with his frequent behavior of leaving me alone at home and always working overtime. I never thought he would betray me. No way. I'm still very angry. I'm going to go find him and argue with him. Sophia finished angrily, rolled up her sleeves, and was about to walk out. I quickly stopped her, smiled, and shook my head. Don't go. I don't care anymore. At 19, he didn't hesitate to take a knife for me. I lowered my head. From that moment on, we were even. What about Jacob? It's all over for me. Sophia hugged me tenderly, comforting. It's okay. I'll introduce you to 100 good men. Each one is much better than that unreliable guy. I laughed and easily agreed. I never imagined she would actually do it. Sophia took me to a bar to have fun. She even called over a dozen male models to keep me company. She said she wanted to help me get over my troubles. I couldn't stop crying. Before we could even start, Jacob rushed in with red eyes. Without saying a word, he grabbed the male model next to me and punched him in the collar. He had completely lost his mind. I shouted, "Jacob, what are you doing?" He stopped in his tracks, his eyes full of surprise and hurt. "Emily, how could you do this to me?" I frowned, and replied coldly, "You and I have long since had nothing to do with each other." He tried to come closer to me, but Sophia stopped him. Then Sophia scolded him unceremoniously. "Jacob, you irresponsible person. How dare you come here and pretend to be a decent person here? You want to act innocent after doing something wrong. Why don't you take a good look at yourself? Think about what you've done. If you still have a conscience, hurry up and sign the divorce agreement. Otherwise, I'll find the best lawyer so that you won't get a penny. You'll be left with nothing." Jacob saw that I was on Sophia's side. His face showed no expression and didn't speak up for him as he used to. I felt even more aggrieved and sad. He said, "Emily, let me explain. Okay, I don't know why these past 2 days. I suddenly remembered all the little things we did together, and I realized I've loved you so much. Emily, I understand. You must love me too, right? We've been together for 10 years. You must love me. Do you remember the day I confessed my love to you? It was the first snow of the year. We held hands tightly. You said you would be with me forever." I interrupted him coldly. Looking at his shy and reminiscing face, my heart felt cold. It turned out that it was because of the sudden recollection of the past that there was now so-called love. But time will fade everything. I asked myself, if I waited another 4 or 5 years, or even just 2 or 3 years, what will happen? What will become of this love? Will he go behind my back again and do things he shouldn't? Will he keep bringing other women home? First, he'll hold me up high, then he'll drop me hard. And finally, he'll strangle me and laugh coldly, saying that I asked for it. "Jacob, you really make me feel uncomfortable." He ignored Sophia's dissuasion, kneeled in front of me. His voice was low. It sounded like he was pleading. "Emily, I was wrong. I shouldn't have done that. I was just out of my mind. I promise you, I will never do it again. Emily, you're the only one I love." I coldly shook his hand off. I didn't want to say anything more. I just called the security guard to take him away. He struggled and shouted, "Don't pull me. I haven't finished yet. Emily, you have to believe me." His voice gradually faded, and finally, it was completely inaudible. The next day, I went to the law firm to file for divorce. Sophia had helped me sort out and collect evidence of Jacob's infidelity. With this, the divorce proceedings should go smoothly. But I didn't expect Jacob to show up again, and even made it here. He tore up the divorce petition on the table. His eyes were red, angrily and confused. He said, "Emily, I will change. Why won't you believe me?" He looked at me. His eyes were cold like I'd never seen before. He was slowly breaking down. He kept repeating, why, Olivia? Yes, is it because of her?" He suddenly looked up. His eyes were terrifyingly red. "Emily, as soon as I go back, I'll break up with Olivia. Yes, as soon as I go back, I'll tell her to leave. Don't let her bother us again. That way we can live in peace." As he spoke, his eyes suddenly revealed a sense of uncontrollable emotion. Then he stormed out. "In the past 2 days, Sophia has let me join her company." The indictment was also quickly delivered to Jacob. "Everything is progressing as planned, except for occasional text messages from unknown numbers. The content is more or less the same. Beg me to forgive you. Make me believe in you." I don't hesitate to block them every time, but he changed his number so quickly. I looked at the new message that had just arrived. The content had finally changed, but I felt a vague sense of unease in my heart. He said, "Emily, I've dealt with all that trouble. I'll come and get you home." Okay, the next day, Olivia went straight to the company to find Emily. She accused her emotionally. "You'll get your comeuppance." Her hair was messy, her face contorted. It seemed like she was suffering great pain. She was so mad she wanted to come over and hit me, but quickly, the security guard grabbed her. He held her in place. Olivia stared at me. Her eyes were full of anger. It was as if she wanted to tear me apart. "It's you. You're the one who caused all this. You made Jacob force me to get an abortion. You made me lose my child. I'm going to get you. I'm going to get you." Did Jacob force her to have an abortion? I frowned. Suddenly, I noticed that Olivia's once big belly had now become flat. I thought about the crazy message he had sent that day. I couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. This behavior was really too much. I hadn't recovered from it yet. Jacob walked quickly up to Olivia. Raising his hand high in the air, he said, "How dare you come here?" Olivia's face was hit, swelling quickly. She was stunned, her lips trembled. Unbelievingly, "Jacob, how could you do this to me?" A flash of anger crossed Jacob's eyes. He grabbed Olivia's chin firmly. "If you hadn't sent those messages to Emily, provoking a quarrel, how would Emily have proposed to divorce me?" He raised his hand again and hit mercilessly. "The child in your belly is something that shouldn't exist. I helped you solve the problem for your own good, but you didn't appreciate it and went to Emily to make trouble." Olivia fell to the ground. Her body, which had just suffered a miscarriage, could not withstand the blow. She felt sharp pain in her lower abdomen. The ground was stained red. Jacob, however, did not react. He turned and walked towards me. His face wore a gentle smile. My best friend Sophia immediately stood in front of me. She confronted him. "What do you want?" Jacob looked at me. His tone was a little agitated. "Emily, I've come to take you home." His attitude towards Olivia now was exactly the same as it had been towards me before. Indifferent and ruthless. I looked at him quietly, unmasking my disgust. The same mistake. I will not make it a second time. It was that teenager who pulled me out of the predicament. The one I truly love. As for the man in front of me, I hate him because he really betrayed me. Seeing that I didn't react, Jacob said anxiously, "Emily, don't you worry. The baby in her stomach is gone." Olivia crawled to Jacob's feet with difficulty, crying and shouting. "I'll send her away, far away from us, so that no one will come and bother us." "No, Jacob, you can't do this to me. Don't you dare," Jacob said impatiently, kicking her away with disgust, his tone full of nasty words. I looked away, not wanting to pay any more attention to them. Sophia had the security guards throw them out. Jacob was dragged away. Looking back over his shoulder, his eyes were full of longing. "Emily, it's okay if you don't want to go back today. I'll come pick you up tomorrow." He spoke firmly, as if he thought I was just being stubborn. If only he'd put in a little effort, I could be like I used to be. I was quickly appeased. Time and time again I put up with it, but time and time again he hurt me. This time, I didn't look at him. I just calmly walked back to the office. It wasn't long before there was a loud noise from the street below the company building. It sounded like a serious collision and explosion. Sophia hurriedly pushed open the door to my office. After telling me that Olivia and Jacob had been thrown out, Jacob threatened to send Olivia away, and the farther the better. As a result, Olivia took control of the car after it started. While Jacob wasn't looking, she suddenly took the steering wheel and turned it randomly. She seemed a bit out of control, laughing loudly. "Ha ha ha. Jacob, I love you so much. How could you do this to me?" Then her emotions became even more agitated. She muttered, "My child is gone. He must be so scared. I have to go find him. Ha ha, in that case, let's face the end together." The car accelerated and drove onto the highway. The oncoming truck couldn't avoid a collision. The two cars slammed into each other. There was a loud explosion. Olivia died tragically in the accident. Jacob was sent to the ICU after resuscitation, but all his organs were severely damaged. It was uncertain whether he would wake up. The second trial was over. When the gavel came down, I felt a mixture of emotions. Walking out of the court, the words "successful prosecution" kept echoing in my head. I smiled. I felt a sense of relief I had never felt before. My best friend Sophia ran over. She hugged me tightly. She congratulated me happily. Then, she winked mysteriously and said with a smile, "Bow, there's some more good news." I smiled and signaled her to hurry up and tell me. Sophia had been holding her breath all the way. Finally, she couldn't hold back any longer and blurted it all out. Jacob, that heartless man. Today his heart suddenly stopped. Resuscitation was useless. The doctor announced that he was dead. She kept talking. "Humph. He got himself into trouble and he's suffering the consequences. I hope they, the unreliable pair, never get out of this mess." I smiled softly. What about them? They brought this on themselves. I don't care anymore. The sun is shining. Shine on me from now on. I'll live my life, start a new chapter. The end. It's like I've been having a long dream. In my dream, I can actually use my phone to contact Emily from the future. Emily tells me. She married me 5 years later. When I heard the news, I was overjoyed. My greatest wish was to marry Emily and be together forever. But then, she suddenly burst into tears. While crying, she asked me to leave her. She said I would betray her in the future. That was impossible. I firmly denied her accusation. I loved her dearly. How could I betray her and commit infidelity? But the person on the other end of the phone was getting more and more out of control. Listening to her cry bitterly, my heart felt like it was being gripped by an invisible hand. I could hardly breathe. I wanted to help her. I didn't want to see her sad, but she just wanted me to go. She said that was the only way her future could change. Seeing the photos Emily sent made my eyes red with anger. I couldn't believe that my future self would really do such a thing. She opened the video. It completely confirmed the accusations. I couldn't believe it as I watched my future self bring another woman home and kept hurting her. My eyes gradually became desperate. She said she wanted to change the future, but in that kind of future, there was no place for me. I closed my bloodshot eyes. It didn't matter if I was there or not. As long as she was happy, I let the sharp knife pierce my chest. The blood soaked through my shirt. I watched her cry her heart out as she hugged me. My heart felt like it was being cut with a knife. The pain was unbearable, but I couldn't tell her. If I tell her, she'll be sad. Maybe she'll even be angry and blame me for being impulsive. She always says that about me. I gently stroke her face. My mouth is full of bitterness. Emily, I really want to promise to love you forever. That way, I won't have to bear the pain anymore. I'll leave your world even in my dreams. I watch myself gradually become transparent. Am I going to wake up? I feel my eyelids getting heavier and heavier. I tried to open my eyes, but they slowly closed again. It was pitch black. I smiled helplessly. So, it was all real. I wasn't dreaming. It's okay. It's for the best. If I die, the future might change. In this life, she should be happy.